Happy Tuesday, May 23rd, Spartonians. You can see the agenda today. We are talking primary and secondary groups. And when we're done with that, you have the chapter 5 and 6 reading guide questions 31 through 36 for tomorrow. Grab your notes or your reading guide, whatever it is that you're keeping information on, and let's get to it. Groups, primary groups, secondary groups, what are they? Let's give you a little context here. We've been talking about status now for several days. In regards to status, we've talked about your reference groups or your social groups that you find yourselves in, the role that you play within those groups, and then the obligations, the rights that come with it. Talking about groups, we're talking about a more narrowed view of the people around us, a more narrowed view of those that we keep company with. All right, reference groups, social groups in this chapter, they're referring to those as a social category, right? Groups of people with shared characteristics, being a senior, being on the football team, being on the hockey team, being on the dance team, right? Shared characteristics. This is a broad view. I would imagine, take for example, being seniors, right? There are kids in your senior class that you are not friends with. There are kids in your senior class that you may know nothing about, but yet you're a part of the same social category. Or last week, we would have called this your reference group or your social group, right? Pretty broad characteristic here. Today, we're focusing on a more tailored, defined, specific group of people, all right? We're talking about groups, and in this section, they refer to groups as people with one or more people with common goals, beliefs, behaviors, thoughts, right? Again, we go back to the senior class. I would imagine there are people in your grade that do not have the same beliefs, do not have the same thoughts, do not have the same behavior, and certainly do not have the same goals. So now we're looking at a much more narrow circle of people. Now, the picture here is about the movie The Hangover. I'm going to use this as an example to get you guys to understand just the finer intricacies of the difference between a primary group and a secondary group. Primary group, these are going to be your closest circles of friends. Perhaps they're on the same team with you. Perhaps they're in the same grade with you. Perhaps they work with you, right? There are other people with whom you go to school. There are other people with whom you work, and there are other people with whom you compete, but that you wouldn't consider them to be in your inner circle. You wouldn't consider them to be your closest people, all right? Within that group, you may find people, find friends that you are emotionally close with, that you have a responsibility for, that you knowingly seek interaction with. This is your primary group. We've gone from a broad category, senior class, football team, swimming team, doesn't matter. We've gone from a broad class of people, broad group of people, and narrowed it down to a much smaller circle. Those for whom you feel responsible for, those who feel responsible for you. That is your primary group. If we look at the movie The Hangover, which is a fantastic cinematic experience if you have not so indulged, we see this transition. We see this transition from a social category all the way to a secondary group to finally, at the end of the movie, a primary group. At the beginning of the movie, right, you've got Doug, Phil, and Stu sharing common characteristics. They're friends of Doug. They're on a bachelor party. They're going to Vegas. They're going to Caesar's palace, where the real Caesar did not live. 3 of the 4 had an emotionally close, knew each other well, sought interaction with each other, but the 4th one did not. They would very much be a secondary group. people that share a part of their lives focusing on the task at hand, wishing Doug well before he got married. But by the end of the movie, it is very clear that these four, right, this wolf pack, if you will, transitioned into a primary group, emotionally close, knew each other well, had their best intentions, their best well-being in mind for one another, continuously seeking interaction with one another. All right, primary groups are often small in size. They are often face to face. All right, they're often around one another, and they're continuously seeking contact with one another. So again, if we were to go back to last week where we were talking about your reference group or your social groups, that's a broad category. You have a lot of characteristics in common with a wide group of people, right? You have many social categories or many reference groups or many social groups that you're a part of. But these people are part of the same category. You may not have an emotionally close relationship with. You may not know each other well. You may not feel responsible for them. Primary groups happen in a small number. I mean, I guess a good way to think about it would be a clique. Like you guys have small groups of people that are your ride or die, you do everything with. That is your primary group. And you can have multiple primary groups compared to a secondary group. Secondary groups are people who are together, share part of their lives performing a specific task. Football team, basketball team, softball team, working on a group project, being a part of Avid could potentially be a secondary group. Within that same category, right? Within that same social category, within that same social reference group, or reference group or social group, you can have your primary relationships. Typically, secondary relationships are relatively impersonal, and there's only limited interaction with those people, and it's usually around the goal that you are trying to achieve. Primary groups emotionally connected, constantly seeking interaction with those other people within the group. Secondary group, impersonal, usually objective motivated or objective focused. All right. Both of these are still relatively smaller in size when you consider the broader categories of groups, broader categories of people that we were discussing last week. I am done for today. You have 31 through 36 on the chapter 5 and 6 reading guide. Tomorrow we'll talk about in and out groups before we knock out the next section on social interactions, which I'll be back for in class. Remember, many of you have yet to turn in your project. So if you have not done that, get that done today, or at the very least before tomorrow, or by tomorrow. I won't know if it was turned in today or tomorrow or yesterday, but make sure that is done by Thursday and turn into the not the hand-in bin, but turn it into the podium behind my desk before I get back on Thursday. With that, hope you're all doing well. Hope you get outside and enjoy the nice weather today. And I'll see you guys on Thursday. Go Spartans.